Okay, welcome everyone to our session, the UN CSW65 parallel session, hosted by the 5 global advocacy group, Women's Sport International, Women's Sports Foundation, Africa College Sports of Sports Medicine, International Association of Physical Education and Sport and Girls and Women, as well as International Working Group on Women in Sport. My name is Khame Mutibi. I'll be your moderator for tonight's session under the topic Collaboration Builds Sports Contribution to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Empowerment and Education. Thank you for being with us today. Settle with us and enjoy the presentations before we can get to the discussions. In a few minutes, I'll be now introducing you to our Dr. Carol Gillespie to give us opening remarks. She's the advocate and former president of Women in Sport International, a former Women's Sport Foundation trustee, and also a former co-chairperson of the International Working Group on Women in Sport from the USA. Thank you, Dr. Gillespie. You can now start and share your presentation.
Thank you very much, Jaime, and welcome to everybody. We are just so pleased both to be here and to have you here with us. When we began planning for CSW65, we knew that we wanted to lead off with a brief recap of the major milestones of achievement in the past 25 years. So presenting a few of these milestones is my task today. I'm hoping that you will keep in mind that in these brief few minutes, it's just going to be a fraction of what has been accomplished. Equally important to us is to emphasize that these milestones have been achieved in what is primarily a women's way of leadership through collaboration. Feminist-based research in the social sciences has shown that women leaders favor an inclusive and collaborative style, which is often in contradistinction to the traditional top-down style, even referred to in the literature as the great man theory of leadership. Consistently throughout this narrative, I'm going to try to make clear how the leaders and members of all of our global organizations have brought these changes about. We know that we're not yet at our desired destination, but each and every small step has been a result of extended collaborative effort. These changes are most definitely not a feature of the mere passage of time. Our narrative begins at the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, Beijing, China. A consistent theme on our part throughout has been to demonstrate to the mainstream women's movement that sport, physical education, physical activity is a vibrant thread in the tapestry of our movement. Presenting workshops, NGO sessions at Wairau were a step in that weaving. Here's a picture of our 1995 presenters, Marge Snyder and Yolanda Jackson from the Women's Sports Foundation, Alpha Alexander and Chris Shelton from WSI and Pescave. The Beijing Platform for Action, the stunning document that was the product of the Fourth World Conference, featured 3 mentions for the first time of the sport, physical education, physical activity domain. These language insertions were greatly facilitated by Elizabeth Darlison from WSI and Australia, and the Honorable Pendukini Itana, an IWG co-chair from Namibia. An additional result of participation in Beijing was the possibility of being accredited by the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. The Foundation and WSI are the only global women's sport advocacy groups to have special accredited status in the area of women's health. This accredited status gives our 2 organizations the possibility of being invited to attend and participate in certain kinds of UN events and to make written interventions on selected topics. To maintain the message of the importance of domain inclusion, our organizations have consistently presented NGO parallel sessions at the March meetings of the CSW. Here's a picture of a typical session at the Church Center. That should be familiar to many people. The Church Center at a session in 2011. Another important thread in the milestone narrative has been the global conferences of the International Working Group for Women in Sport and the key products that are produced there. Here in the center of the screen, you see the locations globally of all the conferences that have been held. And to your far right are the principles embodied in the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration, which the IWG is created to sustain and to promote. Almost 600 organizations and governments have signed the declaration at this time, and that process is still ongoing. Here are some of the co-chairs of the IWG being introduced at a conference. I hope you can see that close ties are maintained among all the organizations and the leadership, which is primarily voluntary. Ties are also maintained between our organizations and the leadership of the UN Division for Advancement of Women, which became UN Women. Presentations and keynotes at the IWG have been made by such icons as the Honorable Angela King, the initial director of DAW, Dr. Carolyn Hannon, and Phumzile Nkuka, the present executive director of UN Women. Out of these kind of ties as well, particularly with the aid of Dr. Hannon, a significant product emerged, the publication by the United Nations of this monograph in the Women 2000 and Beyond series, Women, Gender Equality in Sport, which is published by the UN and available in 5 languages. WSI has had its greatest impact through its research task forces and the evidence-based advocacy produced in each. There are 3 content areas of particular impact, especially influencing the IOC Medical Commission. You see here the work of Dr. Barbara Drinkwater, a WSI founder and the first female president of ACSM, with her development of the concept of the athlete triad. There are several safe sport initiatives promoted by Dr. Fasting and Celia Brackenridge, and more is going to be presented on that a little bit later in our program. And the inequities of deaf and hard of hearing athletes, chaired by Dr. Becky Clark. You see here a picture of the United States National Governing Body for Deaf, the president at a signing ceremony for the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration, which was an action taken following publications of the findings of that task force. The American College of Sports Medicine is a renowned organization in the sports sciences. Dr. Carol Garber, a past president of ACSM, will give a focused report on the progress of ACSM in a later section of this panel. But here, the achievement of the Exercise is Medicine program is highlighted, as it has contributed to community level involvement of girls and women through the last lifespan for the past 10 years. By far the oldest of the organizations involved in this panel is the International Association of Physical Education and Sport for Girls and Women, founded in 1949. Episcopate has become a mainstream of the quality physical education QPE movement, especially through its cooperation with ICSPE, the Council for Sports Science and Physical Education, and UNESCO. In addition to this contribution to getting young girls on track for active lifestyle through QPE globally, Episcopate has also contributed through its conferences in locations where the involvement of girls and women has been inconsistent or even non-existent, and also publications in many of these same geographic areas. As we've already seen, the Women's Sports Foundation has been a frequent partner in all the work discussed thus far. The last type of milestone I'm going to mention today is the facilitation of infrastructure for girls and women globally. The Sports Foundation, because of its well-known image, has been a frequent model for these organizations. And this seems to be based on 3 factors: carefully planned research efforts, the capacity to procure funding, for the programs that are going to be produced, and the timely support coming from famous and up-and-coming athletes. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up in my order here. The spread of these infrastructure organizations are demonstrated in this slide. We have a program in Zambia founded by Matilda Mwaba. Sadly, Matilda passed away last year. Here's a picture of her presenting at the CSW in 2011. Another recent addition to this stable of new organizations is the Somali Women Foundation. This is a picture of a national basketball tournament in Somalia, which occurred just a couple of months ago. The foundation actually built the court, the seating capacity. It was an outstanding event to take place in an area where it's very difficult for girls to participate in something like sport. Emphasizing again, this has been only a fraction of the contributions of our organizations towards SDG 5. You'll get a lot more detail from the people to come in the panel. And I'm going to turn the platform now back to our moderator. Thank you, Jaime, and it's all yours.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Carol. And thank you for taking us through the milestone and giving us background on each of the global group that is here. I would like to introduce you to Karen Isokson Silva of Women's Sport Foundation. She's the Vice President of Research and Education, and she's going to be presenting on We Play Interactive, Engaging Girls in Physical Activity and Sport. Thank you. Over to you, Karen. You can now show your video.
Great. Thank you so much, Jaime. Great. I am really privileged to be with all of you here today on behalf of the Women's Sports Foundation. It's especially exciting to be here to share with you the Women's Sports Foundation's latest initiative, We Play Interactive. It's one of the largest programming initiatives of the Women's Sports Foundation to date, and it's in its final stages of development and scheduled to launch this June. We Play Interactive has been a long time coming, and with the good fortune of funding from Yahoo Sports and the truly collaborative work we've been able to do in the field, We Play Interactive has moved from an idea on paper to a fully dynamic online hub for coach and program training and curricula. For a brief overview, first of all, We Play has been designed for program leaders, coaches, and mentors. Whether you're an adult working in a structured sports setting, a program leader or mentor helping girls to become physically more active, this training and curricula is for you. You'll notice it is not sports specific, but rather it is really rooted in foundational movement skills connected to physical literacy. It's holistic and theme-based and connected to social and emotional learning frameworks to address mental, social, physical health for all girls in all settings. Second, I want to point out that the overall goal is to create a safe, welcoming, and engaging environment. So beyond the training provided and curricular activities, that is really the intention, to create physical and emotional safety. We recognize that's paramount. And so the program environment is essential. And We Play helps to ensure that all girls are operating in a space that enables them to thrive. And third, We Play inspires young people to embrace their individuality, elevate their voices, and discover their own passions through physical activity and sport. We Play is really designed to engage each individual in her own journey and her own relationship to physical activity and sport. And it goes without saying that because We Play Interactive has been developed over the last year, it's really coming at a pivotal moment in history, certainly in the US and around the globe. And so it's a reawakening of sorts and an opportunity to really tap into the tremendous voice and engagement we know that is so critically important for young people. As with all of the Women's Sports Foundation's initiative, We Play is grounded in research. First, it's inspired by our Go Girl Go curriculum, which was developed in 2001 with the goal of getting sedentary girls to become more active. Secondly, it builds on the latest research. We Play brings together research findings from the Women's Sports Foundation's most recent reports, including our 2019 report, Coaching Through a Gender Lens, Maximizing Girls' Play and Potential, and our 2020 report, Keeping Girls in the Game, Factors that Influence Sport Participation. And both of these research report, as well as all of our research, is available on our website. And importantly, We Play Interactive integrates best practices and insights from the field. So it's not a top-down approach, it really is bottom-up, and those practices and insights have informed all of our work. And in fact, throughout the development of We Play Interactive, we've been conducting focus groups extensively with program leaders and coaches and young people to make sure that it is really reaching folks in the way that we have intended. We Play Interactive is designed to be welcoming for all. It's been specifically designed for girls 8 to 10 and 11 to 13. Those two developmental age groups are obviously quite different. And so embedded in We Play Interactive are specific coaching tips to ensure that coaches and program leaders and mentors are equipped to address the complexities within each age group. Second, We Play Interactive takes a universal design approach. We've been very fortunate to collaborate with one of the leading organizations in the States on physical activity and disability. It's NCPAD, the National Center on Physical Activity and Disability specifically. And their support throughout this process and really their partnership in content development has ensured that all of the training and curricular activities are welcoming for all girls with cognitive, emotional, and physical disabilities. And so the universal design approach has been key to ensuring that it's truly inclusive. And third, we hope that We Play Interactive, because of our approach, is culturally reaffirming, healing-centered, and rooted in equity. And those are the cornerstones of all of our work. Again, it was developed during a really unique moment in time, and we have made a wonderful strides in ensuring that all voices, and in fact many new voices, have contributed to this content so that We Play can meet this moment and really infuse the core values of respect, diversity, community, and equality. We Play Interactive has, there we go. We Play Interactive is holistic and themed based, again, to address social and emotional learning. There are modular topics, for example, building community, mind-body connection, managing adversity, just to name a few, to give you some examples of some of the topics we have addressed. I like to describe We Play Interactive as taking an activist approach that builds on girls' agency and ownership. And we borrowed a lot from the research in this arena to ensure that girls' individuality is embraced and they really have a lot of voice and choice. And that's really a centerpiece of We Play Interactive. There are 4 key content areas. The first are training modules. There are 7 of them, each about 15 to 20 minutes a piece, that program leaders and coaches can go through. They're very interactive. They are not required. They can be used a la carte, but they really are designed to deliver information and reinforce skills in an engaging way. Second, we have our activity modules. There are 10 theme-based modules, each with 3 45-minute activity plans, if you will. So program leaders and coaches have a whole lot to choose from, and they can choose themes and activities that really align with their program goals and objectives. Third, We Play Interactive features a new video library. Even during COVID, we were fortunate to be able to do a lot of remote shoots, and the video library currently features 8 of our female elite athlete ambassadors who really provide some authentic storytelling around their lives and how their stories connect to the themes of We Play Interactive. And then finally, We Play Interactive is really an opportunity for ongoing community engagement, be it through surveys or discussion forum. We really hope it will facilitate sharing of knowledge, ideas, and best practices. I'm just going to conclude by showing you a few screenshots just to give you an inside look of what We Play Interactive experience is all about. This is just an example of one of our training modules, Make All Girls Feel Welcome. We tried to keep everything very clean and simple. It's very visual and designed to be easy to navigate. An example of one of our activity modules. This is really just to demonstrate the way in which we approach the activity modules was really, we hope, easy to follow with activity times, equipment needed, and I'll just point out that very little activity, if any, is needed for any of the activities to ensure that it can be deployed in any setting with limited resources. Clear learning outcomes, and you can see followed by coaching tips for each of those developmental age groups, and so on. An example of our video library page, you can see here just some of our athletes noted with their quick bio and then connected links to each of the videos, again, connected to the modules throughout We Play Interactive. And I think at this point, I'll hand it back to Hame.
Thank you so much, Karen, for taking us through the We Play Interactive, how they're engaging girls in sports and physical education, and also great that you shared with us on how to create a safe environment, which is welcoming and engaging for the program leaders, for mentors, and for coaches. Thank you so much, Karen. I would like now to introduce you our next presenter, Dr. Carol Garber from American College of Sports Medicine. She's a professor of Behavioral Sciences at Columbia University and also a trustee of the American College of Sports Medicine from USA. She's going to be presenting on women in science's role in change in practice of sports and exercise medicine. Over to you, Carol Garber.
Thank you, Hame. Hello, everyone, and really pleased to be here today to represent the American College of Sports Medicine. In spite of its name, ACSM is an international organization with over 60,000 members and affiliates worldwide. We've been really excited to collaborate with colleagues from these impactful organizations in this session today. ACSM has a scientific mission to advance the multidisciplinary science in understanding physical activity and human performance, health, and the clinical care of athletes. Our flagship journal, Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise, was launched in 1969, and the first article on women appeared in the second issue. However, the first author by a woman, Dr. Barbara Drinkwater, did not appear until the third volume in 1971. Here you can see the number of articles published in MSSE since 1980, with the primary topic of women, girls, or females. While we're doing much better in attending to the science advancing the understanding of the particular concerns of women and girls, we still have a long way to go. Only 17% of all articles published in MSSE have a main focus on females. ACSM also publishes scientific evidence-based position stands, consensus statements, and calls to action, some of which you can see here. Almost all of these have information relevant to women and girls, but very few have had a specific focus on women or have included sections devoted to women, reflecting the lack of inclusion of women in research or the study of sex differences in our research. The ACSM guidelines for exercise testing and training has published 11 editions since 1975, with the most recent published last month. Women have served as the senior editors for the last 2 editions of this very influential publication. Unfortunately, it has not been officially translated into languages other than English. ACSM has made great strides in recent decades in advancing women into prominent leadership roles. Our current president and our newly elected president-elect are women. However, ACSM started as a predominantly male organization, but we proudly note that one woman, Dr. Josephine Rathbone, was among the founders of the organization. She was an influential scholar advancing the role of exercise and health. Our first woman president was not elected until 1988, 34 years after the founding of the organization. Dr. Barbara Drinkwater was an incredible scientist and served as a role model for women scientists everywhere, including myself. I'm happy to say, since Dr. Drinkwater's presidency, we have had 11 women serve as president of our organization, and currently nearly 75% of our board members are women. Women also serve in many other leadership roles throughout our organization. So this is a sea change since I first joined the organization back in 1982. Since 2001, ACSM has made concentrated efforts to improve the diversity of our organization in the field of exercise and clinical sciences, and to support the professional development of individuals from underrepresented groups in sports medicine and exercise science, defined broadly by race, ethnicity, gender identity, and sexual orientation. We also have several initiatives specific to women, including the consensus statement on the female athlete triad, which was published in 2007, and several programs designed to support women in their professional development. In addition, we have a strategic health initiative whose purpose is to keep attention on women's issues at all levels of the organization. ACSM has been proud to have long-standing collaboration with WSI, which was formalized in 2016. These collaborations have resulted in several important guidelines and consensus statements, as well as co-sponsoring a number of meetings on critical gender issues in sport and exercise. ACSM is also active in the global community with its Exercise is Medicine and Active Earth International efforts, which promote physical activity for health and also active transportation to improve the environment. These programs have been impactful on girls and women of all ages. We have held side events at the UN on the role of physical activity in non-communicable diseases, and have International Relations Committee and Board of Trustee members devoted to the concerns of our international members. ACSM has been a leader in the professional training and certification for health and fitness professionals and sports medicine physicians. These have included a number of international efforts to bring together expertise in different areas of the world. I hope you have enjoyed learning more about the efforts of ACSM to enhance inclusion of all people in our work and to advance the science to embrace the diversity of all people. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I now turn over back to Hame.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for showing us how ACSM is making strides in women leadership and their role in sports and science medicine. You can now switch off your camera. Thank you so much. And I'll now go and introduce the Women's Sport International presenters. We have two of them, Diana Huffman, which is the president of Women's Sport International from Canada, as well as Dr. Carrie Fasting, who is the past president of Women's Sport International. They will be presenting on leadership and reducing non-accidental violence in sport, challenge for the future. Over to you, Carrie Fasting and Diana Huffman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just see if I can share the screen. Just a moment, please. Here we go. Yes. And then.
Thank you, Carrie. You can now make it.
Yeah, I just, I know what I shall do, but I cannot see it because I have this.
Okay. No,
wait just a moment. I start here at the bottom.
Okay, no, don't worry. We have a few minutes for you to finish. Thank you.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And Diane Hoffman is going to start, our president.
Thank you. So thanks, Hame. Thank you, Kari. Greetings to everyone. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, Women's Sport International has played a long time role in contributing to advancing Goal 5, but within the sports sector, specifically Goal 5.5. And this is to ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life. Since our beginning, WSI has been a fearless advocate in women's participation at all levels of sport, from athlete, coach, officials, to decision makers. This organization, Women's Sport International, is what leadership is really all about, built by innovators, risk takers, experts willing to share information and experiences, strong communicators, and people who actually live what they talk about. So our key to success has been from the beginning with our first president and leader, Carol Oglesby. As you've heard Carol speak already, she truly believes in collaboration and that no one organization can change a whole culture. Carol led her team, and together they set the stage for action. Using issue-based task teams, that's been our tactic, of researchers and practitioners. They embraced, partnered, and shared resources willingly and with other organizations to achieve their goals. This continues today as the way that we work through the guidance, mentorship, and championing of leaders like Carol. The now and the future players at Women's Sport International are continuing in the struggle and continuing to engage experts and use research-based knowledge to advocate and to promote change. Noting now with COVID-19 pandemic, we've thoroughly seen that we have all this way that we've come, we're still not on equal terms. We're falling back. And therefore, it's really important that we do not stop advocating and will fall back even more. So the challenges go on. But to give you a good example of how we do work and to explain our collaborative efforts, the sharing of expert knowledge, Kari Fasting, one of our founders, a past president, mentor, and advisor to Women's Sport International. She's a highly regarded researcher, an expert on gender-based violence in sport. She'll demonstrate how, together with other key stakeholders, and I must say many of them are on this panel today, the efforts of Women's Sport International and how they have and continue to impact and change the mindset within sport. Gender-based violence is one of the Sustainable Development Goals under gender equality. It is 5.1, and to end all forms of violence against women and girls in the public and private spheres, including trafficking and sexual and other types of exploitation. I'll now turn it over to Kari to talk to you about the role that WSI has played in promoting and making change within reducing gender-based violence globally. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you, Diane. What I will do, I will take you through some of the milestones that has happened in relation to non-accident violence in sport. We start with the WSI task force that is from 1995. As you have heard, we started in 1994. The picture you see here is of Dr. Celia Breckenridge, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. She was the driving force here, and she was leading our first task force on sexual harassment. The task force produced a leaflet on harassment and abuse in '96, which was among the first written statements on this topic, and as such influenced many institutions and organizations. Some years later, in 2004, we made the WSI position statement and broadened it. It contained paragraphs about trust and authority, gender and sexuality, hazing, resilience building through sport, risk of sexual exploitation in sport, and recommendations for minimizing the risk of sexual exploitation. The content that Celia developed by producing these brochures, she developed further and used in many contexts. Notably, it was mirrored in much of her work for the IOC and UNICEF. The next milestone run from '96 to 2006. And that's the first empirical studies that were published, trying to map the extent and nature of sexual harassment and abuse in different sports and at different levels of performance. In this period, also the first book came out. This is from Canada, from Sandy Kirby and co-authors, who also, Sandy was also a member of the WSI's task force, and a book by Celia Breckenridge in 2001, and then an edited book that we did together in 2002. I will show you a couple of numbers so you just can get an idea. This is some of the first empirical results that was published. This one is from Norway, a study among elite level female athletes, and there we found that 28% of the athletes had experienced some form of sexual harassment. A few years later, we did a study in Czech Republic, and here we found that 45% of female athletes at different levels had experienced sexual harassment. UNICEF and UNICEF's work is another milestone. And here you can see Susan Bissell, Director of UNICEF Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, together with Celia Breckenridge. What we did for UNICEF was that we wrote a review with a focus on industrialized countries about protecting children from violence in sport. In this review, we found, among others, that children experience discrimination and harassment, sexual violence, physical maltreatment, overtraining, playing while injured, peer aggression, parental maltreatment, doping drug abuse, alcohol abuse, emotional and psychological abuse, neglect, and child labor and trafficking. Another milestone is all the work from IOC. Based on the work of a small cohort of researchers, among many from WSI, activists, policy experts, and athletes, the IOC consensus statement of sexual harassment and abuse was developed in 2006 and published in 2007. This was also a milestone in the way that it was the first time that experts or people working in this area with research came together in Lausanne. And it was, as Celia Brecken said, having all my Christmases in one year. This consensus statement in 2007 led to that we worked with IOC on developing different kind of educational programs. And almost 10 years later, the second IOC consensus statement on harassment and abuse was published in the British Medical Journal. And IOC has also, a couple of years ago, published Safeguarding Athletes from Harassment and Abuse in Sport, a toolkit for IOC family, that means the IFs and the NOCs. Then another milestone, and that is the foundation of Safe Sport International. A group of advocates, scientists, and policymakers involved in violence prevention in sport came together in 2014 to develop a global agency to mandate an end to violence and abuse against athletes. WSI members were a part of this group, and WSI has partnered with Safe Sport International. SSI is the international agency leading on the elimination globally of all forms of violence, abuse, and harassment against athletes of all ages. This is a study from Africa, from Zambia, that we did in 2015. And the research question was, what are the most common forms of harassment and abuse? Who are the perpetrators? And we also collected the athletes and coaches' ideas on how to prevent and reduce gender-based violence. We did this through a 3-hour workshop focusing on empowerment, human rights, and ethical behavior in sport. The report ended with 7 recommendations. I'm just going to read 2 for you. All sports organizations should develop a policy, including an action plan for the prevention of harassment and abuse. All sports organizations should develop and implement mandatory procedures for how to handle cases of sexual harassment and abuse, including complaint procedures and punitive measures for perpetrators. Talking about perpetrators, I show you one figure from the report. To the left, you see these different types of harassment and abuse. And what this shows is that peer athletes are more often perpetrators than coaches. And that has also been shown in other studies and was a kind of milestone, because the first studies only focused on the coaches. The coaches here are in orange, and you see the blue are a bit longer on most of the types. You already have seen this publication. Carol Oglesby presented it. It is a good example of cooperation. Many people, including WSI members, were authors. It was launched at the headquarters in New York during the Committee for the Status of Women 52 in 2008. and WSI got a COSOC consultative status in 2010. And since then, we have participated in parallel sessions every year, often on themes related to safety for girls and women in sport, and always in cooperation with other organizations, and the last year together with the 5 organizations that are presented here today. We believe it is important that we continue this work together. Violence towards girls and women has increased during the pandemic, and there is no reason to believe that this is not also true in sport. One of the key roles of WSI is to advocate for the work for equality and for ending violence toward girls and women in sport. And then over to Hamid.
Thank you so much, Diana and Kari, for sharing the milestone on the work you are doing on reducing non-accidental violence in sport. Indeed, Kari, violence has increased during the COVID-19 and during the lockdowns. So we'll go into detail when you get to question and answer. Now I'm going to introduce you our last but one speaker, Dr. Rosa Lopez de Amico from the International Association of Physical Education and Sport for Girls and Women from Venezuela. Dr. Rosa is going to be presenting to us on the contribution to making girls and women visible within physical education, physical activity, sports, and dance. She's last but one, so I would like to encourage you to keep on staying with us here until we get to the end of the session. Thank you. Over to you, Rosa.
Thank you very much, Jaime. It is indeed a pleasure to be part of this important panel that incorporates the global organizations on women and sport. I will focus on contributions of making women and girls visible within physical education, physical activity, sport, and dance. So with this topic in mind, I will start first by making visible some wonderful women who have been part of the IAPSGAB history. IAPSGAB was founded in 1949, just 1 year after the Declaration of Human Rights was signed and approved by the United Nations. I paid respect to these women who back in those days and later on have struggled from an NGO formed by volunteers to bring together interested scholars and practitioners working to improve the position of girls and women in the fields of physical education, sport, and physical activity, and to afford opportunities for the discussion and mutual challenge and to share good practice. Moreover, to cooperate with other organizations and agencies working to promote the interests of girls and women in physical education, sport, and physical activity. IAPSGAB has celebrated quadrennial Congress in all continents without interruptions. As you can observe in the slide, the diverse places in which IAPSGAB has spread the voice, even in complex times such as in 9/11 with the Congress in the same month in Alexandria, Egypt. Challenges are always present, as for example, to celebrate it this year. In 2013, it was agreed to celebrate regional Congress as it was indicated by the members that it was difficult to travel. The idea was to support some regions that requested it. And the first one was Turkey in 2014, in which it was supported the creation of the Turkish Association of Sport and Physical Activity for Women. In 2015, there was an interesting alliance between ministries and universities to celebrate the Congress in Iran. In 2018, the event was celebrated in a tradition in Latin America, that is Cuba Motricidad. In 2019, in Madrid, and at the regional Congress was celebrated the 70th anniversary of the organization. Besides, we support other women's organizations in their activities. For example, 2 of the eldest national women organizations, JAPU in Japan and IAPSGAB in Korea, that were both created in 1954, inspired by IAPSGAB. Our connection with quality physical education became paramount when in the last decade of the last century, the decline of physical education was acknowledged in several world summits, minutes, and UNESCO meetings. As an ICSPE member, we worked in various documents such as the ICSPE Position Statement on Physical Education, ICSPE International Benchmark for Physical Education System, and the final approved International Charter for Physical Education, Physical Activity, and Sport, adopted in 2015. The collaborative work with the organization incorporates participation in document reviews to minutes. For example, this photo from Minutes 5 in Berlin 2013, participation in preparatory meetings with UNESCO in Paris related with QPE, and teamwork with other academic organizations such as FIEP, IFAPA, and the International Society for Comparative Physical Education and Sport. In relation with actions to QPE, IAPESCAB has supported in various roles, and there are several publications from UNESCO of which of this major project. We advocate for it as one of its dimensions is clearly establish the relevance of gender inclusion, equality, and equity. It is evident in all the materials that has been produced. However, in spite of the fact that all the efforts, reality indicates that there are not enough PE teachers and even less female PE teachers, not to mention the low status that still the subject has in society. In terms of visibility, we have looked at the minority, vulnerable, and discrimination that are present in the sport ecosystem. It is important to keep in mind that anyone could be at any moment in a minority position. In physical education and sport, exists discrimination for various reasons, such as religious beliefs, technological advantages, the color of the skin, country of origin, profession, political reasons, biological, or on how the law is interpreted by the one in power. Collaborative publication. So in order to make it visible, some realities in physical education and sport, 3 major projects were developed to respond at existing gaps in the literature, and that's how these important publications came out. Muslim Women and Sport, Women and Sport in Latin America, the first ever published in English about this region, and there is no one yet in Spanish, and Women in Sport in Asia, coming out this same month. It is important to indicate that many of the authors did not have English as their native language and were encouraged to write about their realities. The following publications are very rewarding. The Continent series makes visible women who have made a difference in physical education, sport, and dance. It includes 219 co-authors from 86 countries. It has to be mentioned that worldwide physical education female teachers are less visible. The following books cover important moments of the history of women's sport organization, honoring the legacy published on the occasion to celebrate the 50th anniversary of IAPESCAB that took place at Smith College in USA. The other book, published in 2019, covers 25 more years of the history of the organization. Another example with partner collaboration was with the Inclusive Quality Physical Education Project in Madagascar with 4 academic organizations. In 2020, we have supported the initiative of the Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sport in India through the Sport Authority of India and LNCPE in a series of 5 batches for a course of physical education and community coaches training program in which over 24,000 participants have benefited. In this month, 2021, it is developing the 6th batch of 16 days dedicated on an online physical education and community coaching program for women teachers in which 9,000 women are participating. Acknowledgement is an important aspect to advance in the quest for women equity and equality in sport. IAPESCAB has 7 awards, 6 of them named after well-known women leaders in sport. In the slide, you can see 3 of the awards that were presented in the last edition of the awards presentation. Carol Oglesby received the Lynn Van Dien Award for her leadership role in contributing to improving the quality of lives of girls and women in sport. And this event is an example of her leadership. Thank you, Carol. The awards acknowledge academics as well as practitioners and women leaders who advocate for sport. The pandemic has affected the whole society. And of course, sport has been affected by it as well. From the child who used to play in the court to the Olympic Games, the impact of COVID-19 to sport and to education context has been impressive. Distant education has become a reality, but keep in mind that remote learning remains out of reach for at least 500 million children in the world. The physical education class has been affected by the virtual class and the discretion of the authorities about the relevance of the subject. We advocate for more efforts to incorporate girls and boys to school and to the physical education class. For many, it is just in a PE class, the place in which a girl might have a contact with sport. We advocate for more publication from various corners in the world and in several languages. Policies in place about gender equality need to be enforced. As well as it has advanced in the political agenda at parliamentarian levels, it should also happen in all sectors of society. We need equality in women's participation in all roles of sport. And I want to emphasize the role of the PE female teacher. This has to be more widely considered. It is not enough if gender equality just happens in one region of the world. It should happen everywhere. Otherwise, it will bring negative effects to the development of society. Now, we invite you to participate in the 19th IWG Quadrennial Congress that will take place in Tianjin, China in September 2021. Opening new spaces for discussion, and we hope you come on board as well. Finally, much can be gained if we join efforts. Thanks from the IWG group, and I leave you with an image of an Indigenous child to remind that this is one of the groups that has been more neglected in the history of society. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Rosa. Thank you so much. Yes, you can now switch off your camera and mute your mic. Thank you so much. And now we are going to go into our last speaker, Rachel Froggatt from the International Working Group on Women. She's the Secretary General of the quadrennial 2018 to 2022, which is also the Secretary of the World Conference of the 2022 conference in Auckland, New Zealand. Rachel is going to be talking to us on Change Inspires Change, a global call to action and the journey towards and beyond the 8th IWG World Conference on Women in Sport, Auckland, May 2022. Over to you, Rachel.
Kia ora, thank you, Hame. It's my pleasure today to be talking from Thursday morning, my time in Auckland, New Zealand. Real privilege months preparing for this presentation. A huge congratulations to Rosa, Carol, Diane, Murray, and Karen for their presentations today. Quickly share my screen for you, so give me one. As Hame, presentation today
Rachel, are you there? Just apologize for Rachel. She's having a little hiccup and she'll be back with us soon. Just give us a few minutes. Just a few minutes. Okay, Rachel will be with us within a few seconds. She's restarting and she'll be back with us. Just hang in there. Thank you. Keep on sharing your questions and your comments on the chat room with us.
hello all. I'm hoping that you can see me again now. Maybe Hame, give me
yes,
the thumbs up.
Rachel, thank you. Okay, thank you.
My apologies all. We were just joking that everything has been going so smoothly through this presentation that no doubt me being the last one will be the one to fall apart. So my apologies to everybody for that. But hopefully you were able to see the first couple of slides of my presentation. So I'm just going to share again and off we go again. Thank you for your patience. So first of all, I thought it would be great to introduce the International Working Group on Women in Sport to you all, for those who are less familiar with this. So the IWG was established in 1994. And it is the world's largest network dedicated to, and our strategic vision is to empower women and girls to advance sport. It is fully aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 5, gender equality. Now, on an annual basis, we deliver a number of programs and activities all around the world, and I thought I would touch on a couple of these with you today. So the first is the IWG World Conference, which is the world's largest gathering of experts on gender equality in sport and physical activity. I'm going to come back to that one because I do have a special invitation to you all with regards to that event. The second thing we do is we were responsible for designing and launching in 1994 the Brighton Declaration on Women in Sport. And it is the world's largest and oldest treaty. It has 10 principles which signatories dedicate themselves to in pursuit of equity for women and girls in the sport and physical activity sector. It now has nearly 600 signatories. And again, I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail in a moment. Every 4 years, we release the IWG Progress Report, which for a very long time was the only global measurement tool that the world was using to monitor the movements of inequity within physical activity and sport around the world. We also have a number of strategic partnerships all around the world, including all of the organisations that are here on this call today. We're incredibly grateful and proud of those relationships which have been built over many, many years. We also have research partnerships around the world with very significant entities, and we work across the board, doing a lot of global advocacy work, speaking, ensuring that people are hearing our messages, understanding what the research and insights are saying, and understanding how they can play a part in encouraging change for women and girls across play and sport and active recreation. Now, I'm just going to touch on our leadership because I think this is a really important point here. So we are governed by a really consistent, very stable global executive, and it's a very diverse and expert group of 13 volunteer board members. Every 4 years since 1994, uniquely, the IWG moves to a new host nation. So it moves around the world and a new secretariat function is established, and that country looks after the network for a 4-year period, and then at the end obviously stages the World Conference. Now, the IWG was initiated in the UK at the first ever World Conference in Brighton in 1994. And the Secretariat was held there over a 4-year period, and there was actually a World Conference in Namibia in 1998 to round out that 4-year Secretariat. From there on, it's moved to Canada, to Japan, to Australia, to Finland, to Botswana, and then obviously now is in New Zealand, which is where I am dialing in from. We have co-chairs. We have a New Zealand co-chair and a Botswana co-chair, so our most recent Secretariat chairperson. And I think importantly, just to mention two of today's presenters, Diane Huffman and Rosa Lopez de Amico, who represent our NGO representatives. So they have permanent seats on our Global Executive Board, working within the network to represent EPSCAVE and Women's Sport International. We have 5 regional representatives who are very well-connected, very powerful individuals in their own right in their region. So Asia, Oceania, Europe, Americas, and Africa. And at this point, I must give a real nod to Matilda Mwaba, our African representative, who we unfortunately lost only a couple of months ago, very suddenly. Rest in peace, Matilda. We also have co-opted experts, of which Hame is one, also on this call today, our previous Secretary General from the last 4 years Secretariat, along with a number of fantastic individuals who are very well regarded and respected in their own right, including Leila de Souza, and Fiona Allen, who works within the International Paralympic Movement and represents our disability voice within the Global Executive. In terms of our members, and it's funny because it's not really a membership base, but it's probably the best way of describing our organisations and individuals that we work with all around the world. So I mentioned earlier the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration on Women in Sport. So this treaty, as I said, was built in 1994, but significantly it was updated in 2014 at the end of the Finland Secretariat. And it's a fantastic piece of work that organisations all over the world have aligned themselves to and are doing their very best to fulfil the 10 principles of that treaty. It's really become a roadmap. It's a very clear direction for an organisation, especially an organisation that may be entering into the space of needing a gender equality toolkit, a gender equality strategy, and a direction for the future. So, as I mentioned, it has now nearly 600 organisations that have signed to it. And some of our most high-profile examples include, for example, the International Olympic Committee, the International Paralympic Committee, the Commonwealth Sport, which was obviously the Commonwealth Games Federation, the ICCC, the International Council for Coaching Excellence, a number of international federations, including FIFA and FIH. And then if you group it into regional examples, you can see lots of examples there from all around the world for organisations that have committed to this treaty. This treaty gives us as IWG an opportunity to also hold our signatories, our members, to account when they behave in a way that we have been unhappy with, or we feel that it is not true to the principles of the treaty. Sometimes we step into the public domain and we make a comment. So, for example, we made a joint statement with Women's Sport International and Episcopate not that long ago when President Mori of the Tokyo Organising Committee made his quite sexist remarks with regards to the behaviour of women in meetings, and we made a statement publicly. But sometimes we're advocating behind the scenes, depending on who the organisation is and where our relationship sits with them as well. So where are we now? So I'm really incredibly proud and excited to be looking after the Secretariat for the IWG over a 4-year period. So it's been here in New Zealand since October of 2018. And I think probably rather than explaining how much this means to New Zealand, I'm actually going to pass over to our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern. Many people around the world will be very familiar with Jacinda for a number of reasons, because of her work on the international stage around the Christchurch terrorist attacks, and also because of her more recent work protecting our country from COVID-19. So we are one of the only countries in the world that have had such a significant success when managing the virus. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to stop my share and then I'm going to show you a video. So hang on one moment. Right, here we go.
I'm really thrilled that as a country, we will be welcoming delegates from around the globe in 2022 to an event which champions gender equity and helps us increase opportunities for women and girls to be involved in sport and active recreation at all levels. And New Zealand prides itself on the progress that we have made towards gender equity. We're very proud of the fact that we were the first country where women won the right to vote, and we now have women represented throughout our leadership, including as our Governor General and Chief Justice, and I'm, of course, the third female Prime Minister that New Zealand has had. We're also doing work to improve gender equity in sport. Last year, our government launched the Strategy for Women and Girls in Sport and Active Recreation to help enable women and girls to realise their potential in and through sport and recreation. We know girls and women in New Zealand face different barriers to sport, and tackling these will require working across agencies to address inequities and improve wellbeing in New Zealand. This is a significant step forward, but there is still a lot more work to do. And this is why the work being done by IWG to lead a conversation around gender equity in sport is so important. I'm excited that New Zealand will be hosting the 2022 IWG World Conference, and I look forward to sharing our stories and experiences when we welcome you to Aotearoa in 2022. Thank you, and tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Here we go, back online again. My apologies all. I'm really having some interesting efforts here with regards to technology. My apologies all. I think I got a bit keen when I was trying to exit out of that share screen then. So I'm just going to share my screen with you again, if it allows me to do so, and continue with my presentation. As you can tell, our Prime Minister, we're incredibly lucky to have such a powerful ally to the cause. She's a person that since the government strategy was launched in 2018 has been a permanent champion for the work that we do. We've also been incredibly lucky to have a sport and recreation minister, the Honourable Grant Robertson, who has worked alongside us here in New Zealand and has made significant commitment to what we are doing as an organisation and for both New Zealand, but also most importantly for the conversation to bring to the world. We're also very lucky that he's just been made Deputy Prime Minister not that long ago, so two incredibly powerful allies. Now, I must apologise to you because it doesn't seem to want to share my screen at the moment. So I'm going to exit out and I'm going to try to make it go again. Give me one moment. Sinead, can you see my PowerPoint at all? Okay. Unfortunately, my Zoom has decided that it is done with allowing me to show my presentation today. So I'm going to continue talking without the slides. My apologies all. So in terms of what we are actually doing as an organisation now, so IWG New Zealand, so importantly, just to give you a distinction there, is an organisation called Women in Sport Aotearoa, and we are the domestic agency here in New Zealand committed to gender equality across play, active recreation and sport. And we were the successful organisation that brought the IWG here to New Zealand. And we have designed a 2-year journey toward and beyond the IWG World Conference on Women in Sport, which is taking place next May. And it launched in September. And the idea is to provide a platform that is dedicated to helping shape individual decision-making and to help influence actions taken towards gender equality in sport and physical activity worldwide, especially during and post-COVID-19. So there's 3 pillars to what we're calling our game plan. The first pillar is a campaign called Change Inspires Change. And this campaign came from the idea that any change, no matter how large or how small, can inspire the next change and the next change and the next change. And it's very much grown into a global storytelling campaign. And the idea behind it is that we are encouraging our entire network all around the world to tell us their stories of change, tell us what they did, tell us what they saw, tell us what they learnt, and tell us in a really practical way how their learnings can be applied into lots of different scenarios around the world. We do have a video which I'm hoping if Zoom sorts itself out, I may be able to show, but in the meantime, I'll talk to you about the second pillar, which is the development of a global community of action. And this is really around the idea of energizing and accelerating the work that our network is doing and enhancing and supporting collaboration all around the world. I think one of the things we've realized is that there is often a lot of duplication in different parts of the world. So how can we make sure that people are seeing what everybody else is doing, gaining inspiration from it, being able to make new connections? And this is something that we think both the conference itself will help us to achieve, but we're also in the midst of building the IWG Insight Hub, which is a really exciting piece of work that New Zealand is leading, which is about showcasing and connecting people from all around the world into essentially an online hub that's going to be showcasing research and insights, case studies, news, stories, and all the kinds of things that we hope will help people connect with each other and learn from one another. I think all of the individuals on this call today, as you've seen, have got amazing stories to tell and are doing phenomenal work. And what we would like to do is create a platform that enables people from all around the world to learn what others are doing. So this is an exciting piece of work that's on its way down the chute at the moment. In addition to that, our third pillar of activity is delivery of the world first. I'm excited about this. For the very first time, the IWG World Conference will be presented as a full-scale physical digital hybrid. And what we mean by that is that we will still be staging the large physical event that has been so successfully staged for the last 7 editions from 1994 through until recently in Botswana in 2018. And we will be working to grow and enhance and deliver a fantastic physical experience. But obviously we are living in a world where COVID-19 is still impacting and will continue to impact travel and people's movements around the world. So in order to enable the world to access the world's largest gathering and conversation around gender equality in sport and physical activity, we are really encouraging people to join us on our online platform. And we are doing a lot of work at the moment to make sure that the experience that a digital delegate has is a very personalised and very special and very, I guess, engaging experience that is more than just a window to the physical event. It will actually be an experience of its own right. This is something we're incredibly excited about. We're doing a lot of work in the background at the moment to build the systems and tools to deliver this fantastic hybrid event. So I'm just going to check on my old mate Zoom and see whether it feels like letting me share my screen. Nope, it still doesn't think that I should do that. So I'm going to move on to my next slide, which is basically touching on how you yourself can get involved. So here I'm going to issue an invitation to you. So there's 3 ways that you can join us on the journey toward and beyond the 8th IWG World Conference on Women in Sport. And the first one is really encourage you, if you're an organisation working in sport or aligned to a sport and physical activity program or activity, please consider whether or not your organisation should be a signatory to the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration on Women in Sport. You will be able to find a lot of information about the treaty and the treaty itself on the IWG website, which is IWG Women, WOMEN, and sport.org. And it will also give you a full list of all of those that have signed up to be a signatory already. The second way you can get involved is we would be absolutely thrilled if you would like to submit a presentation idea for the IWG World Conference itself. Again, on the IWG website, we have a call for presentations open at the moment. And essentially it's a pitch. If you have a fantastic idea or a program or an activity that you've been running that you think the world should know about, please pitch it at us, because we would like to consider it either for presentation as part of the World Conference or as something we can use on our new Insight Hub that's coming. We'd also really like to encourage you to think about either coming out to Auckland if travel allows that for you, or joining us in the online platform to engage and support the global community around this. And the very last thing we would love you to do is, again, on the IWG website, there is an online form which just enables you to tell us your story. So again, if you have a fantastic program or activity that you think perhaps isn't something that is necessarily right for presentation at the World Conference, but you would still like to share it for us to put on the Insight Hub, please jump on the website and fill in the online form, and we will share your best practice ideas with our global community. So thank you very much all. I'm very sorry that old Mr. Zoom has decided not to work with me particularly helpfully today. I would have liked to have shown you our video, but again, you can actually see that on the IWG website. And if anyone would like a link to that, we can drop that into the chat function as well. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will hand back to Hame.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you, everyone, and all the best in your hosting of the conference in 2022 and ROSA in 2021 September. Now, I would like to request all the panelists to put on to play their video and unmute their microphones as we take questions and comments from the participants. You kindly go ahead and share your questions and comments on the chat room as we discuss. We'll be picking on the questions and taking them to the presenters. Rachel, can you have your camera on?
My apologies, Hame. My Zoom has just frozen again, so I'm going to exit and come back in if you don't mind.
Okay, no problem. All right, we have a lot of comments and some questions. I'll be picking on some of the questions are, any one of you can actually raise your hand. You can even show by your hand if you don't know how to raise your hand here, it's okay. Show by your hand, then I'll be allowing you to take the question. The first question would be, to what extent do you consider that the suspension of biology-based eligibility standard for participation in female sports can be considered discrimination or violence against women? Yes. And anyone who would want to answer this one? I don't know whether it falls under Carol Garber or the WSI team, but anyone can decide to answer. Okay, Carol?
I will make a comment here. I noticed looking at the chat that there are actually maybe 3 or 4 questions that are interrelated about this particular topic. And I think it's important for us always when we're discussing this area to try to be as precise as possible with the language. Sometimes this is referred to as an issue of trans sexual people. Sometimes it sort of gets mixed in with what is referred to as intersex situation, when the biology and chromosomal makeup of a particular person is more complex than the sort of traditional pink and blue XXXY viewpoint that is often kicking around in public space. I would say, first off, that I think this is a really complicated area, and there's not going to be anything particularly conclusive about anything I'm going to say. The WSI has determined to have a new task force looking at this situation and condition. I think that as we've gotten a background from the WSI about the history of the task forces and how they have served to provide a sound scientific basis for policy and action in the sport area. I'm familiar with the fact that WSI and also IWG, I believe the Women's Sports Foundation as well, has come out prior in support of certain situations that have evolved out of the human rights debates about athletes such as Caster Semenya, Dute Chand from India. So the positions have already been taken in a broad support of human rights for all and the capacity to participate in sport. Now things have gotten to a little bit different status. I know someone asked a question about the Save Girls and Women's Sport campaign in the United States, I think this is. And this is not a position that has been supported by either the foundation or the Women's Sport International. It was part of that pushed the WSI towards forming a task force. but the campaign itself seems to be aimed at asking political people, members of our Congress or the president, to withdraw certain kinds of documents that have already been issued to give rights and protections to transsexual people, especially because they are suffering great violence as a community of people right now. We don't believe that, and as a response, there's at least 27 states of the 50 in the United States that have recently either taken up or actually passed extremely terrible, I would say, legislation. One of them particularly requires that if some complaint is lodged against a girl who performs so well, her gender and sexual biology is in doubt, that young woman will have to undergo a gynecological examination with 3 physicians and produce I don't know, documents, birth certificates, whatever. This is not an arena we think that politics should be addressing, answering. It's not appropriate to cherry pick the particular science study that one thinks supports your own position on this matter. I think it is one of the key issues, paradoxes, complications of the 22nd century. And we just have to get there, I think, with a sense of human rights, a sense of science base, and our best thinking in providing sport as the important right that it is for all. And I'm going to quit now. I think other people have plenty to say on.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Carol. We are working on the 30 minutes time now, so we'll have to take a lot of questions, and then we keep our response brief. Now there's a question from Morgan Powell on what, now that we are a year into COVID-19 pandemic, how would you evaluate where both girls sports at the youth level and elite level women's sport are, the direction they are headed? And this one is open to any one of you. We are in COVID-19. Where do you think the women in sport and girls sport is headed to, looking at the conditions now? Any one of you can pick up the question. Like I said, you can show by your hand and I'll pick you to answer.
I can just say from our experience at the Women's Sports Foundation that there's such great interest in returning to sport, and everybody is looking for guidance on how to do that safely. I think at the same time there's recognition of what's been lost in this year and what that might mean for the future of youth sport in terms of reduction in opportunities, reduction in access, and certainly all of the financial strain and stress that families have been experiencing will have a lot to do with whether or not their daughters are going to be able to play. So we've been doing a lot of outreach over this last year to really understand the needs of local sport organizations to ensure that they have the capacity building tools and the sustainability in funding and in leadership that they need to not just return to sport, but really grow the game for girls. So we're watching that very carefully and working collaboratively with so many to really ensure that we can be supportive and flexible in the way that we can offer resources and technical assistance to ensure that all girls, have the opportunity to play.
Well, thank you. And Rachel, you wanted to say something, but before you answer that one, you can also take the question that was for you. How is New Zealand and IWG preparing for such an important global event amidst a global pandemic? You can make your comment and then also answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Hame. My comment would be, I'm talking this purely from a New Zealand perspective as to what happened here when COVID-19 first hit. And actually, we're celebrating a mini milestone here in New Zealand. Last night at midnight marked exactly 12 months since we went into a hard level 4 lockdown in New Zealand, and everybody was sent into quarantine and at home. So it's been a moment, I think, for New Zealand to reflect on the past 12 months and what we've been through as a nation. From a sport perspective, I will be really honest, the first 4 weeks of COVID-19 lockdown was horrifying for a number of reasons. Our entire sports system collapsed in New Zealand, and it was one of those things that just nobody had prepared for. I think there was an enormous amount of feeling that there should have been resilience plans in place, there should have been plans for the future, and there's been a huge amount of money and work now put into what they're calling the Futures Project here in New Zealand, which is a piece of work about ensuring that that can never happen again, that there are fail-safes in place in order to protect sport. What was awful about it as well is how quickly women's and girls' sport just disappeared. It was almost like women and girls didn't exist in New Zealand for about a month there. And all our sports organisations were talking about how can we get men's sport back up? How can we make sure our rugby teams can play, our football teams can play? And we were all sitting there going, hello, 50% of the population are, included here. I'll finish off this comment by saying we were able to retrieve that situation, and it was an awful lot of work and advocacy behind the scenes. We ran our own video series, which was about trying to get women's voices and leadership voices back into the community around women's sport to make sure that we weren't invisible. And I have to say, having government support was huge. And our government actually, when they released the recovery fund for sport, anybody that only put a men's project or men's team forward got sent back to redo their strategy, and they only got funding if they could prove that the money was going to both men and women, and they've had to report on that back to prove that they have spent it that way. So I would argue you really need investment and commitment at every level of the system in order to protect what is being presented for women and girls. With regards to the second question, Hame, thank you. In terms of what we're doing at the moment to protect against COVID-19, as I mentioned, we've moved the World Conference into a hybrid format, and this is our biggest risk mitigation strategy. It's our belief that the World Conference absolutely has to happen, and it can't be stopped by COVID-19. And everything that's happened in the last 12 months and will happen in the next 12 months is indicating to us that women and girls and organisations and individuals working with women and girls are really facing enormous challenges when it comes to seeking equity, and our movement is really suffering as a result of the pandemic. We need to have that focal point where all of the major leaders in the world that work in this space or can influence in this space are part of that conversation. And if that means using every tool at our disposal, including a digital platform, to make sure that that happens, and those opinions and those comments and those insights are being shared all around the world. We often joke, it's like we want to drop a bomb on the system in May of 2022, and we want all of our work to be dispersed all around the world with a big ripple effect to basically encourage people to stop and ask themselves what they're doing, but also importantly what they're not doing to support women and girls.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much. We have a lot of comments on the chat. You can also go and read on the chat. There are also some links that are shared with us that we can take home with. We have another question to all the speakers. How does the sector globally prepare for any future challenges that may rise, such as the one that we have with COVID-19 right now? The question is to all of you, or any of you. We've seen with COVID-19, so how are we preparing for future challenges?
I would like to address this combined with the question that was previous to this one. One of the biggest challenge for physical education in school has become with this pandemic situation. And it has been the way we used to embrace the class of a physical education per se. And that has brought lots of discussion in many ways, because at first, when the pandemic started in several places, the close down of the school makes some directions be connected what it's supposed to be the most important subjects, and physical education was not in there. When I say physical education, I know in some countries it is called sport. So afterwards, after a couple of months, and when with the support from medicine side, it was understood how important it was to be active and to participate and to have physical activity. And that provoked that in some programs in the world, they started to reactivate physical activity. And also there are beautiful examples in many places. We have from the Ibero-American Council for Sport, they have a publication of different programs that were brought by countries, and particularly in those countries in which distant education is a problem because there's not much connectivity. So the groups themselves in each one of the small towns have managed to start making their kids participate by radio program, by national channel programs dedicated to physical activity or physical education. There are several examples of the world that I would say it was challenged, and it was imposed that physical education and being physical active was very important to continue the thread in physical education in classes. I also want to say that about the challenge that it makes, organizing an event. We in Yapescave, we are going through this challenge. And we are not going to stop. We are going to continue. Like, for example, in our case, the Congress is this year, and it was supposed to be in Japan. That was a preparation of 3 years for Japan. And when the new date came out, it was exactly the same month that it was our Congress in Japan. And Japan indicated we cannot. But Tianjin, China was interested since the year before. Of course, we all know that it's not that easy to do a Congress, online Congress, virtual Congress with communication in China, particularly because in the Western world, there are some platforms that we use that cannot be used in there. But we are saying we go for that. And even if at least, they can listen to us, we will spread the voice there. So this COVID-19 has forced us to do certain things we never thought before. And I'm quite sure many of us in a day has been talking and advocating for women and sport in one place of the world, and then in the afternoon, another place of the world. This has been our reality. It has been involved more challenges, but I think in a way it has made us being connected. And I see that as a positive side, because we cannot allow, this COVID-19 to make us feel depressed or stressed, not at all. Well, we have to keep going and pushing for the programs we have ahead.
Thank you, Rosa. Anyone else would like to take this question? How do we prepare for future challenges? We've seen with COVID-19 and they've taken us a few steps back, but how are we now going to prepare in case we have something similar, such an experience?
Jaime, well, I would just say, as an observer following women's sport as best I can, I've been very impressed with the quantity and quality of seminars and webinars that have sprung up across the world. Everywhere. I mentioned the South Africa Women's Sports Foundation, and I know they've had, in the past 3 or 4 months, they've had, as this is an example, several excellent webinars. So it's been a difficult time, but as Rosa said, people have refused to be stymied, and they have used whatever means were at their disposal to reach out to as many people as possible. The Karen's, the WSF program, I think, does that as well.
Yes, yeah. And we are here online. You could be, CSW was cancelled last year, but now there's a plan here. It shows that now people are trying to come up with ways to keep the momentum going. Any other comment?
I have to turn
Any other comment? How we?
Yeah,
Diana. Yes.
I just want to agree with what's being said so far from my participation in programs that are in Southern Africa mainly, where, as Rosa has indicated, radio has become a very important venue. It always has been, because you can get radio in rural areas and so on. So it's been a very important technology. in Africa to begin with. But as well, it's the technology we're using now with webinars. There's been extensive use of this from governments, not just NGO communities, pushing physical activity, allowing physical activity classes to be on websites at no cost for anybody. The partners that the Norwegian Olympic Committee happens to work with, they're out working with smaller groups. If they're allowed to participate with 25 to 50 people, they go out and they work with them. They provide them with masks. They work where they have social distancing, and they still run their programs, but just in a different way. Maybe they go to the communities 3 or 4 times rather than once, because now they're meeting with 25 people rather than 75. So you have, people are really adapting. It's quite impressive, as Carol has indicated, to see how innovative we've become in dealing with this and understanding fully how important it is to be physically active. I think the health professions are pushing this as well. All sectors seem to be pushing that physical activity in particular is very important for mental health and for physical health. So our organizations are trying to ensure that this continues and promote it as much as we can. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have a question to Karen of Women's Sport Foundation. Does the We Play initiative include support for participants, coaches, etc., in menstrual health and sport? We are developing research on this topic here in the UK and in Zambia with Matilda of NASPA, such a tragic loss. May her soul rest in peace. We are just beginning to understand how menstrual stigma, period poverty, and other factors can make difficult young people to participate in sport throughout adolescence. Karen?
Sure. Thank you for the question. And it is rather surprising that still in 2021, there's a dearth of research on the impact of menstruation on girls and women's participation in sport. And so it's our hope through all of our work, not just We Play Interactive, that we can do a better job in dedicating focus and resources on that space. We've started to make some inroads, and in fact, over the last few months have been working with a partner to develop just a primary survey to get at some of the attitudes that parents have and their daughters have about menstruation and the degree to which it impacts sport participation. So I would like to say that we're much further along in our understanding. Certainly, we've gleaned a lot of insights, from our work on the ground, but we really know that evidence-based research is needed to really sharpen our understanding so that we can be proactive in the way that we address it. And just to circle back to We Play Interactive, the goal of that program is to create that safe and welcoming environment. And I think it would be remiss on our part or for anyone to imagine that ultimately we can do that successfully without acknowledging the developmental changes that girls experience at very different ages. So it's our hope. We have a good starting point. We have modules on physical health and mental health, but that's just a beginning layer. And we certainly hope to deepen that, and I'd welcome anybody else's contribution and collaboration in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I hope you covered it all. And Carol, from ACSM, we have a question from Dambi. She's asking if you have Africa publications in the publication that you shared. I think she just wanted to know that. She repeated the question again just now.
Right. Well, thank you for the question. I think we're welcome, certainly welcome authors to submit their papers to the journal. It's quite a competitive journal, but and there are many international authors. I think actually a higher proportion of international researchers publish there. But I do think we have some equity issues in terms of particularly lower income countries. and regions in the world. So I think it is something that we really need to look at more carefully and make sure that there's access to scientists all over, not only to submit their research, but also to get the access to the science that's in there.
Okay, thank you so much. We have one question, which is probably the last one, from Payoshin. Payoshin now, it says, in certain sporting culture, bystanding is rampant. How can we tackle bystanding in connection to sexual harassment abuse in sports in a very patriarchal sporting culture? This could go to Carrie Fasting or Diana Huffman. How can you tackle bystanding in connection to sexual harassment?
Okay. Well, that is a very complicated question, and but bystanding is a problem all over the world in relation to this issue. And a bystander can also is sometimes also defined as an abuser, because the bystander does nothing to stop the abuse, and it will probably just going on. I think that of course this has a lot to do with gender equality and respect in general. So I think it's important with cooperation here. So if the country has good legislation and laws in general outside sport, and have a minister for gender equality, I think it's important that sports work together with the ministry or other bodies that are working in this area. And of course, also if sport itself have what many today have, an action plan, a policy, guidelines, etc. And also in their material focus, particularly on bystanding.
Okay, thank you. And there's also some material that had been shared with Payo on the chat. Any comment from any panelist before we get to the end of the session where we allow Rachel to show her video? And I'll give any of you panelists to comment on anything that you'd want to comment, or the last word. Carol, Gavo, you have your hand up, yes?
I just want to, really point out, I think the discussion today has really illustrated the lack of research on women and girls, and how important this is, that we've not paid attention to these issues for years. A lot of misinformation is being used to argue, for inclusion or exclusion of, people who, based on their gender identity, which, we really need to understand much more about. But, even issues that, such as menstruation and sport performance and women, we just need so much more research. And I wish that, we could really advocate for more support from research funders, that these are really important issues, and encourage researchers to take these topics up, because often, particularly for women researchers, they feel a little reluctant sometimes to take on women's issues from their, professional standing, because sometimes it's not viewed as being as worthy. So I think we can all do a lot in that area, as well as just to really support and advocate for more work in these areas.
Thank you, Carol. It's a good takeaway for all of us here. I'd like to invite Rachel to share her one of the videos as we go towards the end of our session. Rachel?
Thank you, Hame, and thank you everybody for your patience with me. I've decided to call it Mr. Zoom today because it's a Mr. It's being annoying and painful for me, but hopefully it will decide to cooperate with me to show you our Change Inspires Change video. So hang on one moment.
Small changes can become great accomplishments. Joining from many sources, they flow together to create something mighty. Change inspires change, each with its own story to tell. Stories shaped by people and people shaped by stories. By changing the way we look at things, the things we look at change. Creating champions who don't live by what's engraved in their trophies, but by what's woven into the lives of others. Ma mua ka kite a muri, ma muri ka ora a mua. The International Working Group on Women in Sport has driven positive change for women and girls for more than 25 years. Aotearoa New Zealand, home to 3 upcoming Women's World Cups, will host our conference in May 2022, the largest gathering on gender equity in sport and physical activity in the world, live in Auckland. Or follow the event virtually, collaborating with your international colleagues. You can also join our global community of action right now online. Mentor, be mentored, inspire, be inspired. Sign up now to our tapestry of storytelling, woven with countless threads of change, inspiring change. E hara taku toa I te toa takitahi, engari he toa takitini. Add your chapter to this story right now at iwgwomeninsport.org. Change inspires change.
Thank you.
Rachel. Yes. We've come to the end. I'll now invite Carol Gillespie to wrap it up for all of us. Thank you from me, and thank you for staying with us, and thank you for good presentations. Carol, back to you.
Thank you, Hame, and thanks to all the panelists. It was terrific to be able to work together. And thanks for all the people that are looking in on our program. We're counting on you to carry away the message and keep up what we've talked about, I guess, is the good battle, getting into good trouble. I think I noticed 1 or 2 people in the chat were talking about how valuable the coalition concept is. So I hope that we can continue coming together to work together, because I think that's really, as that wonderful, wish I could speak the indigenous language of New Zealand. I love the sound of that success comes from everyone. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you again, probably, if not before, at the conferences that are coming up and next year's CSW. Goodbye, everybody, and thank you.